One of the most powerful systems for transforming the system of identity, and we'll pause just a moment here, the system of identity is a self-referential pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, which is never optimal. Every identity, every personality, every system of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being is not ideal, meaning there's easily another pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that leads to substantially higher levels of felt sustainable experience. And so the question becomes, why, when one is unhappy or depressed or lonely? First of all, why, if one is unhappy, depressed, or lonely, would you expect that to be different tomorrow if you don't change one or more components of the identity? Because the identity is just an I that says this density, this frequency and pattern of energy is me. And how do I know it's me? Because it was me yesterday and the day before. And so an identity has the benefit of providing a sense of stability, but it has the downside of always being suboptimal. No matter what your identity is, it could be better. It could be more intelligent. You could create more sustainable well-being with less time, money, and natural resources, with a different pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And yet, for this sense of certainty, for this sense of stability, we hold on to the past identity. Now, how do you navigate? It's first of all worth just briefly mentioning that when we change our identity, we change where we end up in the future. We change our daily experience of reality. We enter the unknown. Because whenever you go into change, there's a moment, an hour, a day, a year, where it's not entirely known. It's different. And this involves a tremendous amount of trust in self and something bigger than self. Because if you don't trust, you don't want to let go of control. To change something, one has to trust that it will be better. And that's hard to do when there's a history of trauma, when there's a history of overwhelming pain and fear that didn't get integrated, that didn't get answered, that didn't get healed. Because every child that's gone through overwhelming trauma, and all trauma is overwhelming, that's its definition, has the desire, the plea, the prayer, I never want to feel this way again. And of course, if you never want to be traumatized, you never want to be out of control, you never want to feel helpless, the easiest way is to reduce as many variables as possible, to avoid the unknown, to avoid change. And so even though there are many, many, many more luminous and intelligent identities, just patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, we could identify with, we're afraid of the change. So here's a way to work with and through that fear and also get a really good handle. Now, if you have spent any time meditating, and I definitely recommend imagining, dreaming, there is a you that you can feel sometimes that is your best you, that is a fun you, that is a courageous you. There's a you that you can imagine that is more optimal than you are here in this situation. And to move your identity, what you identify with, which thoughts, feelings, habits, sensations, etc., that you identify with now, to that more optimal identity, and work within the framework of that terror of the unknown that every traumatized individual carries. You can get to know the part of you in detail. What would this part do? You get to know that fun, beautiful part inside. And you notice how they're talking and who they're talking to and where they're spending their time. And what do they do when this particular phone call comes up? And what do they do when they have the chance to buy this or something else entirely? What do they do when given the context of your probabilities, the things you could reasonably do over the next year? What do they do? Do they amplify the fight and go into it in great detail and help piece it apart and put it back together again? Or do they blow it off and say, oh, well, let's move on? Or do they say, okay, this isn't an ideal relationship. Let's let it go. How do they handle, they that have the qualities, the experiences that you want to have, how do they deal with that? You can ask them, what would you do about getting my building permit? What would you do about investing in this or in this? How would you deal with this? And how do they feel? What's the daily life look like? And in this scenario, there's no bind, meaning there is a difference between you and this ideal version, this one that's mastered what you're going to learn. And you can feel and get to know what that feeling is, and you can look at the way that they handle this, this, and this, and why. And then you can borrow. In other words, you can move what you identify with. I would do it this way. But if you understand how this way makes you feel, and it's not feeling very good, and you understand how this way makes that probable you, the you could be if you just thought this thought instead of this, believed this instead of this, said this instead of this, wrote this instead of that, did this at this time instead of this time. If you understand what that you is doing and how that feels, then you can try it out. You can take a thought, a belief, an attitude, and you can say, you know, that me, who's really good at having fun and being free, etc., that me would have done this. Let me try it out for 10 minutes and see how that makes me feel when I think that thought, when I have that belief. Feels pretty good. Okay, I'm going to do it because I like the result. I want more of this feeling. And so, while we all do need a pattern, a default mode, a pattern of thinking, of feeling, of speaking, of doing and being, it's up to us at any given moment to edit the pattern. And when editing the pattern, when evolving our identity, one of the most valuable teachers and sources of guidance that we can find is a very high emotional state with a clear visualization. What would this person do? What would this person do? And how would they do it? And what's the result? Now, it's important to work into the thoughts and the feelings and the beliefs congruent with the action, and not just believe what we believe and then do what they would do with our beliefs. Because the outcome will be different, and it's also easier to get to know some of those beliefs, some of those energies, some of those things. So you can start saying those conversations in your mind, in your journal, and seeing how does it feel in your body to say this to so-and-so instead of this. And very quickly, if we want, we can find ourselves behaving like we optimally could in this and this and this area, and experiencing a different reality, a different probability field emerging from the new identity.